Hello and welcome to our first development video for TGIK Games Develops. I figured I would start off with a general idea of games we've finished working on and are waiting on writing rulebooks or artwork, and talk about some of our upcoming projects. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what we've got. The first game that we plan to take to Kickstarter is Mars 445, and the idea of this game is it's a frantic race to build your colony modules on Earth and launch them off to Mars. And everybody's playing in real time, and the units are being built in the middle of the table, and players can steal points from each other if you used more of my cards to build your colony. If you've played Dutch Blitz, then you're familiar with how this game is played. What we need to do with this is we need to finalize the rule book as it's still in the form of Charge, which was the old name of the game, and yeah, that was the old name of the game. It used to be an army building game. We also have to get the artwork finished up. We've already gone ahead and we have quotes set, so we know basically what the game is going to cost to make. And once we have the art, then we can start our marketing plan, which involves getting the word out and stuff like that. So that's Mars 445. The second game we're looking at to take to Kickstarter is Priests of Olympus. And this game, all the players are gods atop Mount Olympus, and they're controlling priests running around from temple to temple on the planet. And temples have various value ranging from 10 devotion to 50 devotion, and the goal of the game is to collect 1,500 devotion. And to collect devotion during each turn, there's a phase where you collect from the temples, and you can also collect devotion by attacking other priests. And the combat we've decided is really, really simple in this game. It's if my priest is more powerful than your priest, then your priest wins. However, priests of lower value can team up to defeat the strongest priests, because the strongest priests will only hang out with the priests are represented by a die, and 1 through 6, and 6 will only hang out with 1s and 2s, but 5 through 1, as many of them as you can fit, will hang out together. So if you lose, there's something we call ping pong combat, which is really easy to understand if you have a visual, which I don't have right now, so I'm not going to show you. That'll be in a later video. At this point, we have a nice basic prototype, a nice alpha, but we need to order the beta and get one that's durable, and we also need to come up with a plan for the art, because we don't have one. With Line Drive, that's our base. We're calling it our baseball deck builder, even though it's not necessarily a deck builder. It's just deck building is the most easily grasped mechanic within the game. Not that the mechanics are difficult. It's just to be able to call it a something deck builder kind of gives it makes it easier to market to the non-sports gamers in the hobby, at least in my opinion. And this is, as I said, a baseball simulation. It has some gamer elements in there, but it's also a sports game that you can play with more than 2 players, and it's not gimmicky. A lot of sports games, they are 2 players, or they're a 4-player game, but really what that means is that it's 2 players on each team. And we wanted to come up with something where you could have an odd number of players, and everybody got to play as their own team. And we've accomplished that with this game, and we're really kind of proud of it because it's a lot of fun. And the game can play up to 9 players. It can play as many players as you can fit at the table, quite honestly. But in terms of time, if you wanted to invest the time, you could play it. But 3 is what we would set the base game at, because that's reasonable for time. What we need to do with this game is we need to write a format to the rules. We have a card that has all the steps, and we've played it so many times we know what all the steps do, and this is common for the way that we build our games. We have index cards with just steps of rules, and we just have to format those rules and make them look pretty and get copies of the game out for people to test. We also have to figure out what we want to do with a beta prototype. Aiden went ahead and built some cards, and he ordered them, and they look really nice. We just have to figure out what we want to order, what we want to make ourselves, all sorts of stuff to actually complete the prototype, at least the beta prototype. With class selection, this is a game where players are trying to collect different cards, and these different cards are worth different amount of points. Now, the goal is, if there are cards where all the cards that are worth 4 points, let's say, if you've collected 2 of them and I've collected one of them by the end of the game, you would get 4 points. If I collected 2 and you collected 2, then neither one of us would get points. So there's kind of it's very abstracty. The theme right now is class selections. The idea is that you're running around. Everybody has a fixed amount of cubes that they get to use, and you're running around campus. You're trying to convince different groups on campus that they want to vote for you. Well, in an early testing, we've discovered that the theme doesn't hold up that well. And we will probably end up having to change it, even though I really like it, but the feedback has basically been change the theme. So the rules are done. They have to be written up properly, but the rules are in good outline form. We just have to finalize those, and we're going to have to think about how we want to sell this game. And I really think that we're going to have to come up with a different approach, because I don't see a lot of games that are sold as abstracts out there. At least I don't know where people or how people find abstracty games. It seems like there's an underground to the board game hobby of where people talk about abstract games. If you know, please let me know. I'd like to talk to that underground. Speaking of which, we have PTQ, which is short for pairs, trips, and quads. It could also be pairs, traps, trips, and quads. I don't know. There are traps in the game, but basically players are trying to collect sets of cards and in order to turn in pairs, trips, or quads of these cards. The cards are numbered 1 through 4, and you're trying to collect a pair, a 3 of a kind or 4 of a kind. And you can turn them in for points, and these point values vary over the course of the game. The catch is there are traps that are on the board, and if you turn in, say, pair of 3s and there's a trap there, it's face down, you don't know what it is. It could be good, it could be bad, you don't know, and you're going to set the trap off and you're going to have to deal with that trap. It could cause negative points, it could cause you to have to discard certain cards from your hand, it could give points to other players. The traps can do a lot of things, and that's where a lot of our work is on this game. We have to figure out what we want to do with the traps, because the traps, they've just been too soft. Like, traps need to hurt. That's basically what we've discovered in early testing. Is early on, nobody really cared a trap was there. You just set it off, and okay, well, that's fine. It really was just a race to collect cards. Well, now we've worked it to where traps are actually meaningful, and we want to know how meaningful they are, and that will come along with testing. The second to last game, well, before I leave PTQ behind, I should say that it's very abstract to the point where I don't know if it could be themed. I'm sure it could, but it would feel disingenuous. And I would rather spend time trying to figure out how to market a game as an abstract than attach a theme and just say, well, we've attached a theme, there you go. That doesn't feel right to me as a publisher or as a designer. What team are you on? This is a game where there's a 4x4 grid, and everybody's trying to claim cards on this 4x4 grid by playing cards on the outside border face down. So this is much easier to explain with a visual, so I'm just going to say if more than one player claims a card, that card stays on the board and nobody gets anything. If one player claims a card, they get to claim that card, they get to add it to their hand, and you get to do certain things with these cards. Again, another very abstract-y game, and this is a good early view into the way I design games, where I do everything abstract-y to begin with, unless there's a certain feel that I want to go for with a game that I know is thematic off the bat. But abstract-y games come very easily to me, so that's where our games start. And when I hand them over to Aiden, or when Aiden and I talk about them, if he comes up with a theme, or if we play test it in an early round of playtest and somebody says, hey, this feels like jumping out of an airplane, then that's the theme we'll go with, at least to start, and then we'll just continue playing with that. And I find for me it's easier to attach a theme after the fact than it is trying to attach as we go. But saying that, there are also games that I develop in parallel with theme along with the mechanics, and I'm finding that the more and more I develop, or the more and more I design games, the more I'm trying to build story behind the games early on to help me get through some of the kind of mechanical dead spots. I talk about that more on our podcast if you're interested. It's Cardboard Architects. Educational games. The last thing for this short little video here. Educational games, we've got two. They're called the Clock Game and Math Boggle. And the Clock Game is it's a deck of cards, and there's 12 spots on the clock, and basically players are trying to move around the board to collect different cards. And the reason you're collecting cards is to match a number that's in the middle, or to design an equation that will get you to a large number in the middle. So I'm collecting or we as the students would be playing, and around the board there are these various numbers, and they're only single digit numbers. Well, in the middle there's a number that could be 876. We have to come up with an equation using cards in our hand, and we can only use each card once. We have to come up with an equation that will equal 876. And you can use any function that you know of, as long as it's something you've been taught and it's something that's verifiable. So players are moving around, picking up these smaller numbers, and they have to think of math equations in their head. And that's kind of the magic of this game, is students learn to do math in their head as quickly as, it's not really a quickly thing, but players learn to do math in their head. And it was kind of a joy to watch students get to do math this way. They seem to really enjoy it. And the last game is Math Boggle, where it's a 4x4 grid of numbers. We may have played with a 6x6 grid as well. I'd have to look back at notes. It's been at least two years since we've tested this game, but the basic idea is players are allowed to use each number in the grid once, and they have to come up with different equations. And basically, it's kind of like not categories, but it might be Balderdash. I don't remember. I don't know the mass market game, but basically, if I have the equation, we both cross them off. If I have a unique equation, I get a point for it. So, in fact, that might even be Boggle. I don't know, but it was a hit the two times that we tested the game, and there's an interesting thing. There's a state of, this is kind of my feeling on the world of educational games. I don't want to make money off of educational games. I want students to be engaged with learning. And I understand, and the reason I feel this way is because I know that teachers will steal whatever they can, because there's not a lot of money in their pockets, nor is there a lot of money in the pockets of school districts. So I have no illusion of making any money on the educational games. I just want to make education better. And if people happen to notice that TGIK Games developed the education game they're playing, and oh, by the way, we have other more fun games or more entertainment games that you can also purchase, then that is where I would want to make our money. That sounds really awful to say, but it's the truth. I'd rather people say, okay, I had a fun time playing this game when I was at school. What else do they have to offer? That is kind of our motivation for doing this, along with making education more accessible and more interesting for students. Because I know when I was a student, if there were games out there that were more engaging, I'm curious how much better my grades would have been. Anyway, so that is kind of what we also have. There's one down here, Bounty Hunters. This is kind of the newest project I'm working on my own. I don't really have enough to write down at this moment in time, but it's kind of where players are running around a board and they're killing each other. You pick up weapons, and they give you extra powers, or they give you extra range, or there's also armor that people can pick up. It's really, really basic combat where you're chucking dice and you're killing your buddies as often as you possibly can. It's kind of our answer to player elimination, where players are getting eliminated left and right, and as soon as you get killed, you're back in the game. So those are kind of the projects we have going on live right now. If I'm honest, like the educational games we haven't looked at in a long time. The what team are you on? We haven't looked at in a long time. A lot of these PTQs, same thing. Really, the thing we've been spending the most time on is Line Drive at this point, and we are kind of we're at a spot where the development is done. We just have to get a lot of play testing done. So we have a lot of rule writing to do, which writing rules is awful, and yeah. So I think that's enough for this video. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Thank you. And as we go along, these videos will get more refined, I'm sure. And I'll have more visuals as we go, and I'll talk more in depth about these games once I get into writing the more in-depth Google